Great. Hey, everybody. Woj here. Hunt Club podcast, Cyberminds show. Familiar faces. Chris Ray, Tiffany Nip. Um, this show's going to be fun. We got Chris back. Chris was on not too long ago, maybe a month ago or something.
Yeah,
We were
about a
talking
month.
network. We were talking network NDR with Nicole. Now we're going to talk identity, ITDR with Chris and Tiff. So it should be a good conversation. I'll let Chris, why don't you reintroduce yourself if people haven't tuned into the last podcast you were on with us.
Sure. So I'm Chris Ray, field CTO overseeing security and risk at GigaOm, where we perform practitioner-led research. We can dive into more what that actually means if you want, but I think the key takeaway is the research we do is performed by hands-on practitioners in the technology domain, which is what our differentiator is. We're really creating simple to use buyer guides for often complex and difficult to understand technologies.
Tiff.
Hi everyone.
Tiff's been on the
Yeah.
product briefing podcast. You
Yes.
probably see her quite a bit on that one, but
Yeah,
why don't you
yeah.
introduce yourself anyway?
Of course. So Tiff here, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Vectra AI. Before Vectra, I was a PMM for Azure Cloud at Microsoft, and my experience have been across SaaS, digital transformation in conglomerate, etc. And here at Vectra, I look after our identity and cloud capabilities within our platform. And part of my day-to-day job is really to explain to security teams why less is more and why signal clarity is important for the SOC.
All right, let's dive into ITDR, Identity Threat Detection and Response. Chris, if I remember back from our NDR conversation with you, network detection and response, it was we were talking about network and NDR being like the source of truth, right? You can't get anywhere without a network. Like all the information's on the network.
Yeah,
And
everything good
oh
and
god,
bad
we could
happens on the network.
yeah,
Mm,
exactly. Now the notion of like identity threat detection and response. There's DR sprawl going on in the market right now. We've got so many DRs. It's like network, endpoint, extended, identity now, cloud, CDR. What's next? You could argue there's probably another one coming. Who knows? But why ITDR? What
mm.
was the impetus behind your practitioner-led research into this technology, if you will?
Yeah, yeah. So there was a realization. There was a very common, still is very common, and it's a great way to get introduced to the importance of identity. Is people say identity is the perimeter now, right? Like let's shift away from firewalls and physical perimeters and a literal draw a circle around your assets and put a perimeter around it. That was the legacy approach to securing things: is build that wall, create your castle, dig your moat, and protect the outside world from coming in. And then we've all figured out, well, it doesn't really matter if you have trusted identities that are easily walking over the bridge to
Mm,
get into that castle. You also now need to manage those identities, right? That's fine, but we still need to keep evolving. And identity is no longer the perimeter. It's really like a radioactive asset. You know, it's it's not something that is going to protect you. It's something that you have to protect your organization from, and that
mm,
really drove our that's our impetus for researching ITDR, is because we realized it's not a toxic asset, but it is something that is dangerous. It is something that's good and bad at the same time. And anything that falls into that kind of vague category, you need to have really good
Yeah,
observability into it.
yeah. Tiff, what have you heard?
yeah, it's funny
You're
you
doing a ton
you
of research on
yeah,
ITDR. Like, I mean, you're living it every day. Like,
yeah,
what's your perspective?
yeah.
Agree, disagree?
Totally agree. I think it's funny about the radioactive analogy. We in Vectra always say that attackers don't hack in anymore. They log in because they don't no
Yep.
longer need to break into the firewall. They can just compromise a legitimate human or machine identity and gain access to an organization, remaining undetected. So we've been seeing this in like Scatter Spider, Midnight Blizzard, causing millions of damage to organization. And it's just the speed of the attack and also how they operate multi-domain. They don't only stick with one area, but they just go to the network, go to the cloud, like move in the network, etc., which makes it very hard to detect for security teams who relies on silo tools to detect these silo domains. So
Yeah.
absolutely
Yeah.
agree.
I'm going to take that for just a second and kind of give a
Yeah.
real world example of exactly what we're talking about, just to cement this. You
Yeah.
used a really great word there, and it's escaping me. I think of it when you said it. I was like, oh yeah, I call that the authorized intruder, right? That's an authorized intruder. We we realize attackers are no longer breaking in simply by looking for source code, 0 days, software exploits. They are purchasing valid sessions and passwords for $5. They're making traditional
Yes,
intrusion detection
100%.
systems worthless.
Mm. Yep.
Okay. No, you guys are talking identity in the sense of a human being.
Yep.
Talk to
Now,
me about your definition of identity. What
yeah,
is an identity? What can be an identity? What can assume an identity? How are identities or accounts? What do they look like in organizations today? Is it just
yeah.
the human, or are you talking about other?
So I'm interested to hear what Tiff has to say on this. I break it down into two high level categories.
Hmm.
ITDR is not my topic; it's not my domain. But I'm a field CTO over
Mm.
security and risk. So they're all my babies. Some of them are ugly, some of them
Yeah.
are cute. This is one of the cute ones. So with that said, with my somewhat ignorant bliss to all the nuances of it, I really do. I break it down into two categories. There's the human identities, and then there's non-human identities. And non-human
Yes.
identities cover everything that's not going to be a user interacting with systems or data. So that's
Yeah.
your cloud service accounts, that's your system level accounts, that's your Kubernetes identities, that's your CI/CD authentications that are occurring. That's everything that falls under their API keys, service accounts, all of that. I think I've seen research that says something like non-human identities are 45 to 1. So for every one human
Yes.
identity, most organizations are going to have about 50 non-human identities. That's
Yeah.
a massive blind spot if you're only considering the human part of this.
100%. Align with what you say here, Chris. For us, we think of one more like categorization, which is that human and non-human identities can live in both cloud and network, and you need visibility on all of it to be able to really stop the attack. Because, as you said, like especially for non-human identities, they are service principals, machine credentials, cloud principals, application credential, and the headache is that you don't even know how many are there. As you said, 1 to 45, I've heard 1 to 20, 1 to 30. It's a lot and it's expensive, given all how the transformation is going on with cloud migration. And a lot of time, they don't even know that they exist. Like if you run an Azure application, you don't even know the kind of non-human identity that got spun up. So it's really hard for security teams to monitor their behaviors. And also there's no MFA to be enabled in non-human identities. So it's very hard to protect.
Yeah. So I
I'm gonna throw. Oh, go ahead, Chris.
I was just gonna say I have a working idea that I'm trying to turn into a blog post, hopefully in the next month or so, and it's really that NHIs are going to be the next wave of compromises, and it's not even non-human identities or NHIs. The customers, the buyers, the implementers. It's not their non-human identities, like you said, Azure. It's a really great example, or AWS, Google. When you create a new service or when you enable a new service and you configure it and you use it on the back end, that cloud service provider is creating identities on your behalf to interact with their assets and services. You're not managing those. You're trusting that they are managing them, but you don't have any visibility or control over what they do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is an AI agent an identity?
Getting very
Can an AI
philosophical.
agent assume an identity? So we hear all this agentic AI going on, right? I wanted to throw this question out, you guys. Human, non-human. Is there a third pillar that is agentic AI, and can that assume an identity?
I take a very structured, principled approach to a lot of things when I don't initially have a good answer. So I'm going to say yes if that agentic AI or AI agent is using some sort of authentication credential material.
Mm.
Now, if it's just running by itself in isolation, not interacting with anything, then no, I don't see it as an identity. But What's the real world application of a AI agent if it's not interacting with anything? If it's
Right.
air
Yeah.
gapped on a a laptop somewhere, that's probably not what
Yeah.
we're talking about. So yeah, I would say
Right. Yeah.
agentic AI agents, they're going to need some sort of authentication materials, and because of
Yep.
that,
Yeah.
they're an identity.
Yep.
Yeah. I think to me, it's more also what do they do, like their behaviors. We know that we know that MCP can be abused to automate the full attack kill chain nowadays with the latest entropic research. They may speed up this whole process, but the behavior is still the same thing that attacker would do. So I would argue that it's more about the ability to monitor those behaviors that they do, even though they are like machine speed.
Okay. Now Tiff just talked about something. Chris, this is where I want to bring in the conversation we had around NDR a few weeks back. Um, so can you effectively, Tiff, you said, understand what they're doing? What are their behaviors? How is this identity behaving? I want to take it one step further. If we said the network, you can't do anything without a network, moving on a network. Chris, you and I talked about that last time. Chris, you said that identity is the new perimeter. The perimeter's gone. The tried and true old school network perimeter's gone. Now it's an identity perimeter. Talk to me about the intersection of the two. Can you effectively um, address the challenges of modern attacks with network and identity being two siloed approaches?
No.
Should
ITDR,
they be one? Should they be one? Is NDR ITDR and is ITDR should be NDR? Who cares about the category acronym?
right.
It's like, can you effectively defend against today's attackers without the combination of network and identity? I know what Vectra's going to say, but I want to hear
Yeah.
what Chris has to say.
No, if you're aiming for the closest thing to a silver bullet as you can get, then yeah, you do need identity with network with other telemetry sources, right? However, I don't combine ITDR and NDR in our research topics simply because,
Right.
from a buyer's perspective, it doesn't make sense to split them out. There are buyers who purchase
Yeah.
NDR and have it, and then there's buyers, those same buyers are then going to say, why aren't we doing ITDR? We need to do that as well. It could make sense to them to go to the incumbent vendor if they have ITDR and fold it in. That's the case with Vectra. That's not always the case though. So our research more aligns with the top 3 or 4 scenarios that we expect to find buyers finding themselves in.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
because of that, ITDR we treat it as a distinct but highly synergistic category to NDR.
Mm.
Tiff, what say you?
So
I mean, I tend to agree, Chris, because I think that's how security operates. Like,
yeah,
there might be different buyers. There could be a network buyer or a SOC buyer that's looking at NDR, right?
yeah,
Yep.
For ITDR, who's the buy? In your experience, who is that practitioner or that buyer? Is it the idea? Is it the identity, team or leader, or is it the SOC, or
I'm
is it
finding
both?
it's more of a top-down mandate. And they don't necessarily
Okay.
call it ITDR. They hear
mm,
identity is a problem. They
Yeah.
mandate we need to get better at this. It rolls down to the CISO
So
or
naturally, it's like, let's talk to the identity team because identity is a problem we got to get our hands around.
the
yeah,
identity
And it's
teams
like,
like,
what? I don't
yeah, yeah.
understand attacks.
Yes.
Are you hearing the same thing?
I'm hearing the same thing. So we sometimes network team look after network and identity look after identity, but unfortunately attackers don't silo departments. They just attack everything in one giant attack service. So we always say that attackers need two things to be successful: the initial access with and compromised identity, and then a network to move laterally. And we've seen a lot of these um, scenarios with customers' environment or like hearing from CISOs. I think the best defense really comes from monitoring both domains in a way that is correlated so they can see the full attack kill chain. I was talking to one CISO and he told me that um, previously, before using Vectra, he had different tools giving him different alerts, some on identities from native tooling, some maybe network, but it might not seems to be a big deal for him if he had a low alert from all of these tools. But once it is correlated and he can actually see it's the same person that is acting like compromising the identity and then moving to the laterally in the network, then it becomes a big deal. It's actually some big kind of behaviors that he needs to go do something about. So that's why we always emphasize the importance of correlation, especially between identity and network, and as well cloud as well.
And that's
Yeah,
really a
and
SOC value prop to your point, Chris, right?
yeah, I was gonna just kind of I try to anchor everything in a practical,
Mm,
example. We know attackers often use valid but rarely used protocols like RPC or WMI to move laterally.
Hmm.
The way these work together is ITD tells you who it is, and NDR tells you what it is.
yeah.
It's funny you say that, Chris, because it's like I want to talk about use cases beyond threat detection and response, right? Because the identity buyer has a ton of use cases. There's a ton of use cases within identity. There's a ton of use cases within network telemetry as well. But fundamentally, I'm going to throw this statement at you and get your reactions to it. Because I fundamentally believe whether you're a CEO, a CISO, a CIO, a line of business leader, whatever it might be, at the end of the day, and it's a loaded word, Chris, so you can you're field CTO, you have these conversations. At the end of the day, it's like it's all about resilience, pre and post compromise. Like the business has to keep running, right? It has to be resilient, reduce risk, et cetera, et cetera. But it all kind of boils down to resilience. And I have a simple statement that I want to get your reactions to because you both alluded to this. Chris, you did especially on your last comment. Resilience is knowing what's on your network and how it's behaving. First and foremost, resilience starts with who or what is on my network and how is it behaving? And is that behavior risky? Not risky? How risky is it? How much attention should I place to it, etc. I'm going to pause and let both of you react to that.
I'll jump in there first. It's funny that you phrase it that way because I think you and I are thinking the same way, but I'm gonna use some words that have been kind of some ideas in my head. I'm gonna let them spill out here for the first time. Think of ITDR as a really good hygiene engine for your identity. So when we talk about hygiene, we're no longer talking about those security use cases. ITDR it's a tool that finally exposes the lazy admin syndrome or ghost software costs that haunt hybrid cloud. In 2025, the best use case for ITDR isn't necessarily only stopping a breach, it's proving that half of your cloud permissions are unnecessary and that your zero trust architecture is actually built on a foundation of total trust with legacy accounts. So using that as a hygiene engine, your say IT teams or whoever is responsible for implementing technical governance can go through and do like a garbage collector routine and clean things up and build that awareness, that visibility, that observability. That has massive downstream impacts on your security posture.
Yeah, and I think I agree with that. And I wanted to add that from my research on ITDR, I've observed that there are two types of ITDR in the market. The first one is more posture focused, similar to what you've mentioned, Chris, that fixing misconfiguration, enforcing MFA. The goal is to prevent attackers from getting in. But then there's also a second category, which is more post-compromise focus, which is to stop attackers that's already in your organization. And from what you said, that it's credentials only sold at $5 or $6 in the dark web, is sometimes not a matter of whether it will get in or a matter of when. So we always tell customers that we emphasize a balanced approach and they need to have both kind of defense so that they are best protected. And back to your question, Woj, about like monitoring behaviors, like identity resilience come from knowing identity behaviors in your network. I think that is true because when we look at insider threats, which we recently we have an example with a retail customer that we helped them stop an insider threat because of our capability to like see what's going on in like Enter 65 and what's going on. It really is the fine line between is someone doing something new or someone doing something malicious. And often this is where AI comes in to help to really find those malicious actors without disrupting the business operation and like false positive and causing alert fatigue to the SOC.
Yeah, I think Chris, you're both making me think about the word. I like that. I like the notion of like, you could say resilience, you could say hygiene, you could say posture. Posture starts with knowing the identities on your network and how they're behaving. Um, Hygiene starts with knowing the identities on your network. And I just have a belief that it's a giant challenge answering that question. What's on
Mm,
my network and how are they behaving? Right.
mm,
And that's that beautiful combination of like network and identity that we were just talking about a few minutes ago. And Chris, you had introduced some use cases. I love the lazy admin,
mm,
cloud permissions, zero trust. Beyond in literally the acronym is ITDR, identity threat detection and response, much like NDR, network detection and response. But talk to me about, because Chris, you just introduced them. Um, Beyond threat detection and response, does detection and response or threat detection and response limit the scope of what ITDR and NDR really provide from a use case perspective? Is the definition of those categories fundamentally flawed because it's
mm.
narrowed in their ability to deliver value beyond
Yeah.
detection and
I,
threat detection and response?
I see what you're saying. So there's the way I see it is there's the way that the tools and the solutions are marketed. They're trying to address the urgency that buyers
Mm,
feel because they have these risks that they need to address very quickly. So of course, you're going to say, you're going to tell people, we can fix those problems quickly. We have the solution for that. These are the use cases we solve for. This is how we solve for them. You're going to try to play that, go fish matchmaker game, right? The
mm,
problem is those are sexy problems to solve for. Those are urgent. Those have high demand for resolution. We have a plethora of problems that have existed before the cloud even existed in every single
mm,
enterprise. One of those is identity lifecycle management. That's like, I'm 40 this year. I'm 99% certain identity lifecycle management in computer systems is older than I am. But yet we still don't have, well, I can't say we don't have. You can go out and identify and select a really good identity lifecycle management system. It's not going to be an ITDR though, but ITDRs can, just the way that they operate, if it's a good one, they can do
mm.
really, really good non-human identity
Yeah.
lifecycle management.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tiff, any use cases you've heard from conversations with CISOs and security practitioners?
Yeah.
That's a
I
great.
think
I hadn't thought of that one, Chris. That's an interesting take.
Yeah, yeah. I think compliance is another one that we've seen CISO talking about. With the kind of data that we have, like both network and identity, they were able to like find compliance gaps and violations within the environment. Like for example, some users sharing sensitive files over SMB or logins without two-factor authentication, or even potentially risky kind of behaviors. Like they've seen more login countries than like how many countries that their business is operating in. So these kind of information helps them to be proactive to prevent some of the identity attacks.
If you just alluded to insider threat, insider risk, if I heard you
Yes,
right,
yes,
right? IP theft, IP data leak, et cetera, or at least indications of it happening
yeah.
long before the exfiltration actually happens is like another potential ITDR use case. God, we're at 25 minutes already. I thought, this has been fantastic. This is Chris. We did this before, Chris.
Yep, I know.
We talked about a lot. I want your field CTO, you know, security, broad security strategy brain. to sum this up in three things, three takeaways when it comes to ITDR from this conversation, three pieces of advice you would have
Sure.
for people listening.
I'd say off the top of my head, really lean into the it's not a login, or sorry, it's not a break-in, it's a login reality.
Mm.
Like we were
Mm.
talking about at the beginning, right? $5 credentials,
Yeah.
come and get them while they're hot, that sort of thing. We're not protecting against 0-day exploits anymore. I mean, we are, but
Mm.
if that's where you're spending the majority of your focus, then you're missing the boat. Realizing that the role of network visibility with ITDR's effectiveness and really understanding why that is, that will help you
Mm.
better understand what you're not doing today. And then I'd say I'll call it a shift in philosophy. So moving away from traditional identity and access management, IAM, which is like
Mm.
a static phone book, towards ITDR, which is more as a dynamic active lookup or a hunter. Being, the core argument here is that identity is no longer a perimeter to be guarded, but like I said, a radioactive asset that must be monitored post authentication, if that makes
Yep.
sense.
Awesome. Tiff,
100%.
three things.
Yeah.
They can't be the same three as Chris. You can't say, I agree. Those were good. I can't top those. They can be. I mean, obviously you can agree, but
Yep. So my three key takeaway for this conversation is, first of all, you really need to monitor all types of identity. As we mentioned, there are human and non-human identities across your network and cloud. So it's really important not just have the audit of these kind of identities, but also monitor what are they doing, their behaviors in your network, so you can identify malicious activities from these identities fast. Second of all is that you need to correlate these identity activities across domain to really see the full attack kill chain, because we know that attackers don't stay in one domain and they move across. So it's really important for you to see the full picture. And the third one is really to have the ability to stop the attack. And I would also argue that security teams really need to battle test their defense with red team, with attack simulation, because we know that security vendors can sell you the dream, tell you that they can do everything, but when it comes to defending against real life attack like scatter spider, test hybrid scenario. When an attacker compromises an identity to move to the network, are you able to detect these kind of behaviors, so that to make sure you close any security gaps and make sure you have continuous improved security posture, both pre-compromise and post-compromise.
When you're discussing the massive explosion of non-human identities, service accounts, bots, AI agents, like we talked about, that 45 to 1 number, these are identity ghosts, right? They represent a high velocity risk. There's no MFA on them. They're poorly managed in the life cycle. Kind of getting back to what I was talking about. I think most of the people listening to this, they can't, if you ask them right now, are you effectively managing your non-human identity in the life cycle perspective?
yeah,
I don't know anybody.
yeah,
I don't know anybody that can say that they are. They can say
yeah,
confidently, yeah, we think we got most of them, but not to
yeah,
the level that lets them sleep well at night.
yeah. I'm gonna bucket into the same three. That if I had to summarize, this was awesome. I think my takeaways are going to be, relative to, like, I agree. Um, Attackers don't hack in, they log in, and sometimes they're already in the form of a non-machine identity, right? I think that I love the whole think about it through the lens of like network and identity from like a hygiene perspective, right? Posture perspective. Look at them both at the same time and how those two technologies or approaches work with each other, right? And then the third, I really thought it was like the shift in philosophy. I agree, Chris. I think you got real detailed on IAM to ITDR, which I think is awesome advice, at least to like get people to think differently. But I think differently is what we need to do. Like there's like trying to, yes, there's foundational things we need to do from a security standpoint that we need to shore up, but sometimes we get shiny object syndrome and we don't shore up the foundation. So I think it's like foundationally, what are we trying to do? And is our approach to that working, or do we need to rethink the approach? and open the mind, give security the time to open up their mind and think about what approaches they should take to the problems that exist. And sometimes the old school ways of doing it aren't always the right ways of doing it.
Right. We want to go with what we know works. We don't want to often reinvent the wheel, or we don't want to blaze new trails that are untrusted. Right.
You don't want to tear everything down, but
Right.
it's like how,
you fall into these traps where you're going to do what you know works because that's safe. Well, there's
Yeah.
things that work that you're not aware of that are also safe. So you have to, like you said, shift in philosophy.
Awesome. Tiff, we lost you for a minute, but we got Chris filled in the blanks. I think he nailed your other 2 points. Thank you both. This was great. Chris, you're always fun to have on. I always enjoy the conversations. Tiff,
anytime, have me back.
Yeah. We got to continue it. We got to think about another topic and have you back on in the new year. But thank you both. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Hunt Club Podcast Cyberminds. Comment, like, share, ask questions, whatever it might be. Throw topics at us. Thanks again for tuning in. Chris, Tiff, thank you.
Thanks, Woj. Thanks, Tiff.
Thanks,
Bye, guys.
everybody.